brothers my guys, know that they fly, know that they ride or die. I keep boys by my side, CJ Ike, now I gotta roll with ice. Oh, these brothers my guys, know that they fly, know that they ride or die. I keep boys by my side, CJ Ike, now I gotta roll with ice.
Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Paul with Spheric Reptiles, and thank you so much for tuning in to the top 5 issues that ball python owners have. These issues were collected from doing research. Of course, I looked online to see what other people think. Plus, I got comments. I really appreciate those comments and questions that people have, and just reading other comments of other people that post videos on ball pythons. And in particular, it seems like there's a lot of issues out there, but I'm gonna cover the top 5 things. So number 1 on the list was feeding issues. I mean, imagine that. Ball pythons always eat, right? Yeah, right. So they are traditionally picky eaters. I don't know if this is something that comes from their nature in the wild, where they just don't get the overabundance of food, even though they live close to the equator. They just don't get the overabundance of food, because if they get out in the daytime, there's animals that would eat them. And then if they get out at night, outside of these burrows to go and hunt, then they actually got to come across an animal that fits the right size, that won't hurt them, and is the right everything else. You know what I'm saying? So they're very opportunistic feeders in the wild, but you got to look at the prey size that they can eat compared to what can eat them in the same area. So it's you know, 50-50 chance that they may not make it, which is why they are extremely nocturnal. So that might actually have something to do with why they're so picky, is because they are nocturnal. And if you're trying to feed them right when you get up early in the morning or in the middle of the day, that's still kind of the middle of the night to them. So you might want to change up your feeding time to mirror a little bit closer to when they would normally eat in the wild, which is at night or sometime after 7 o'clock. Another thing that they would do is they would refuse food. So refusal is, you know, if you offer them the food and they don't take it, well, the number 1 thing you shouldn't do is try to reintroduce that food the following week. Give them some time, let them reacclimate, let them think that you forgot about them. They might just be a little bit stressed out. Check your husbandry and see how that works. But you might also want to switch down to a smaller prey size, like so, or a different type of prey. So if you're feeding rats, try to do mice. If you're feeding mice and they're still not taking it, try an African soft fur if it's available. But whatever you do, just don't give up and don't panic. Use a scale to determine the health of your ball python. The number 2 issue that people have, and feeding was like 90%, 95% of all the issues, because ball pythons are relatively hardy. But the number 2 thing that people have an issue with is controlling the temperature and the humidity. Well, the temperature, the best thing you can do, whether you have a heat lamp, a radiant heat panel, or under tank heat pad, is hook it into a thermostat. Set that temperature to about 88 to 90 degrees and use a temperature gun like this. I mean, these are really cheap, about 20 bucks on Amazon, and measure that temperature inside of the tank after it's been on for a couple of hours, right? And that way you can see what the true temperature is, because if you set that under tank heater up under a lot of substrate and you set it to 90 degrees, well then if that ball python doesn't bury down in there, what's the real temperature at the basking site? So I'm going to really stress to take that temperature at the basking site, unless you can use some kind of way to minimize the amount of substrate. Like in our tubs behind me, we do have substrate. I just don't have a super thick layer, because as soon as they poop, I grab it out, and if it's too much, I just disinfect the whole tub. The second part of number 2 is humidity. So you can actually use a sprayer like I have right here and mist your animal, like the image that you see in front of you right now. And the thing about humidity is that if it's too low, then you run the risk of your animal getting a respiratory infection. And if it's too high, or you oversaturate the environment, you run the risk of getting scale rot. And both of those are very, very bad. They're on the extreme husbandry flawed areas, even though your snakes can actually induce respiratory infections on their own by over soaking in a large bowl. So that's one of the things you got to watch out for. But what I would say is to lightly mist. If you get one of these misters, again, like this one from Lowe's or Home Depot, for about 11 or 12 bucks, then you can actually mist that snake down, and it's not as traumatic, because Once you start spraying with this, because it's a pump, a pressurized pump, then it will mimic rain to them. So they don't really freak out as much as when you use a spray bottle. The number 3 thing that people have, and this was way, way down, like I would say less than 5% of all people have an issue with shedding, is shedding. I just said that, right? Yeah. So shedding is number 3. If you got your humidity levels right and your animal is eating healthy food items, prey items, and they're not freezer burned or not spoiled or anything like that, they should shed well. Now, the only snakes that I've seen that, if everything else is right, that have an issue with shedding are emaciated snakes. So those very, very thin snakes, they don't have enough nutrients to generate new sheds or new snake skins so that to push the other skins out. Now, I'm not saying that you should have one whole complete piece, but in ball pythons, that's typically what you would see. If everything else is working right, you'll just see one large piece of shed like I have. Like I have right here. So ta-da, Nuvi Magic. So this is from our pastel pied pepper. And what I do is I use these inside of my breeding tubs for other males that are going in with the female, and that's a whole different thing. It just kicks them off and makes them think that there's another male in there without me actually putting another male in there. So hey guys, give that a try. That's a bonus. So that's what you got for shedding. Number 4 is mites, and that should probably be a little bit higher as far as a fear of any reptile owner should be mites or internal parasites, right? These snake mites, which I got a picture right there in front of you, they are like bloodsuckers, right? So they use your snake's blood to reproduce. They get up under the scales, around the nose, the mouth, the eyes, the cloaca. They get anywhere they can get to where it's going to be a humid and safe environment for them, which on a snake, since they have no hands or no feet, it's easier for them to do that to a snake and just really infest your snake because your snake has no way of scratching them off or anything like that. So what you can do is use prevenamite or a good reptile spray. The prevenamite is a little bit harder to find. I think I got mine off of Reptile Basics a while back, but you can find the reptile mite spray on Chewy.com. I got this big bottle for about, I don't know, I think it was like 30 bucks or something like that, $35, but it's a whole gallon and it'll last me for at least 2 or 3 years. But it's important for you to treat these mites and have an effective quarantine measure before you introduce any new animals into your collection. So you want to keep these animals quarantined for at least 2 months, because that way you can treat that snake for the mites, if nothing else, and at the same time, you can look for any other parasites in the poop. You can notice any behavioral changes of this snake that it undergoes, because this is the time that your snake is under the microscope, right? It needs to earn to be able to get into your collection. So I would say that really keep an eye on this, really treat the snake, soak it in water for about 20 minutes when you first get it so you can make sure it's not dehydrated. Then add a few bubbles in there or Dawn dish detergent so it can actually soak, and that surfactant will actually kill the mites that it has that are out, but it won't kill all the eggs. So then use your reptile spray or your prevenamite, and you actually spray a rag and wipe your snake down really good. Spray down the enclosure that they're going into, and then over the next week, really watch them. And that's one of the good ways that you can treat mites. And if you see any black specks, then you know that you have an issue and you should treat that snake in that enclosure again. And so it's best to use paper in that sense. As far as parasites go, your snake can get parasites from probably rodents. I would say rodents would be the number 1 thing. So if you feed a rodent that is already sick, then whatever that rodent has will be passed on to your snake, because the rodent is warm-blooded, whereas your snake is not. So the warm-blooded animal has a little bit more capabilities in dealing with any of those internal parasites, even though it's unsuccessful, but the snake just really has no chance because it's trying to regulate its temperature. So it's never too hot. It's never over, 90 degrees or 95 degrees at any one time. So that snake has a harder time getting rid of those parasites, and it's just a losing battle. So the number 1 way I think that you should treat that is to really look at the animals that you feed your ball python and make sure that they're not sick. Make sure that they're healthy animals and they're you know, good specimens for your animal to eat because they are truly what they eat. But if your snake gets sick by any means of parasites, collect the poop, you know, yeah, put it in a bag, take it to the vet, and then they can do a culture on it and see exactly what's wrong with your snake and give you the effective medication to treat it. Now lastly, number 5, the behavior of ball pythons. We all know that they're shy. We all know that they like to hide. But if your snake is really hiding a lot and it looks like it's just really nervous, so all of that goes back to number 1, not feeding. All of these things attribute to the snake not eating right, because when they're not feeling good or not doing good, they just don't eat. So what you can do is you can increase the number of hides or the number of things that have foliage or just cover in there for your ball python, and just kind of let them acclimate for over about, I would say about 3 weeks without feeding them, just changing the water. Just that is a very good positive reinforcement for your snake. And then just see how that goes. But if you increase the number of things that they can hide in, they traditionally do better. Now, that's just not all of them. Some of them do better no matter what. But what I've seen is that most ball pythons need some sort of cover. They don't like to be in the direct line of sight because they feel like if you can see them, you will eat them. I hope that this was quick enough for you. And I hope that it helped with these 5 things that people have issues with ball pythons as pets. And please let me know what you think. Definitely like and subscribe to the video. And hey guys, I just thank you so much for tuning in. If nothing else, enjoy the time that you spend with your reptiles and enjoy the time that you have with your family. Thank you.